Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Pilot of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the latest issue of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Stormbringer magazine. Now, as per usual with all these videos, if you like them, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course, drop me a comment down below. I love hearing back from you guys, it goes a massive way to helping out the channel too. Now, this week we are on issue 60 of good old Stormbringer, and we get our first half of our AoS Gargant. So, this is an old sculpt, as you can tell by one, how it's spaced out on the sprue, and the fact it comes with a square base. So these were originally designed for Warhammer Fantasy Battles, hence the square base. So you can use it in the old world if you wanted to, but otherwise it's a 19-year-old kit. So it does come with a few extra little bits and pieces. So you've got a little signpost, you've got some arrows, and you also have good old little farmer boy there, running away, terrified because, you know, a giant's coming to potentially squish him. So, or, you know, he could be running towards a giant asking for a hug. Who knows? But yeah, quite interesting. It's a pretty decent kit as well. I must admit, I am kind of looking forward to getting building this guy up. Does have a few extra options as well, so different feet. There are a couple of different heads, if I remember rightly, which are on the other sprue, and different weapons and arms and such like. So you've already got some arms there, so you've got straighter arms and you've got bent, more kind of crooked arms and stuff like that. So it's up to you how you want to build him, really. So you can have a little bit of your own kind of flair to it, really, if you wanted to. So, but otherwise, pretty decent. Obviously keep it aside ready, because next week we'll have the other part to the mini. So, going into this week's issue, first off, we are greeted by the Sky Fleets. So the Sky Fleets of the Kharadron Overlords were initially formed to safeguard the Duardin against the first incursions of chaos. Now, they have evolved into a major power in the skies above the mortal realms. They are the mainstays of the Kharadron Overlord's military and exploratory operations. So Sky Fleets are the airborne armies of the Kharadron Overlords. Their organisation is dictated by the Kharadron Code, which guides commanders on the proper composition of their force. In sanctioned formations, the Duardin of the Sky Fleets are borne aloft by ingenious engines fueled by precious ether gold. Some, such as the Arcanauts, are carried on huge sky vessels. Others, like engine riggers, are propelled through the sky on by miniaturized engines, where when they get to their targets, troops disembark from their transports and engage the enemy. So, a little bit of information about the good old Sky Fleets. Obviously the Sky Fleets are the main kind of army for good old the Kharadron Overlords, so it depends on how they're kind of built and their composition and such like. So some of them utilise a lot of things like the gun haulers, frigates and such like. Some utilise mostly the engine riggers and the sky wardens and such like that all have these kind of packs that kind of help them fly and guide through the air. But the downside with it is the air is not completely free of chaos or even free of enemies of any shape and size. So pretty much every faction has a flying unit at some point. So you've got, for instance, you've got things like the Demons of Chaos. So you've got things like you've got a Bloodthirst of Air attacking the Kharadron frigate. You can have a Sky Fleet being attacked. You have Vargeists if you're sold like Gravelords. You have Morghasts, I think they're called if I remember rightly, which are from the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and such like. So you've got quite a few that can kind of go and away they go and everything like that. There's a couple that don't actually have any flyers, but yeah, bit of information for you though. It's really interesting. Moving on though, we get our Gloomspite Gits page for our AoS Gargant. So they are huge, a bit dim, and with a raging hangover, an AoS Gargant is uniquely an awful foe to meet in battle, as they stomp angrily around, desperately searching for the cure for a pounding headache. So Gargants have been known to overindulge in ale from time to time, often following a particularly good victory or a particularly humiliating defeat. When suffering from a horrific hangover, they frequently find a quiet and dark place to sleep it off, such as one of the many dank caverns in the mortal realms. In such places they often come into contact with sleepy Troggoths and the Moonclan grots of the Gloomspite Gits. Occasionally a brave grot will risk death to wake the Gargant up and try to broker an alliance. Those titans who agree are often motivated by the promise of an experimental grot brew to drink. So this gives you a little bit of information about why they ally with grots, considering they are the kind of the lesser sons of Behemoth, really. So if you wanted to have a good old giant army, you can. However, they are very, very, very difficult to put together and quite expensive as well. So you can get Ale Guzzler Gargants and you can get the Mega Gargants. And yeah, I did a whole video where we mentioned all of this. But yeah, you can do that if you wish to as well. On the other side of that page, though, you get you obviously to do things like your good old horrible quirk, disgusting tactic, and even name your Gargant as well. Entirely up to you how you want to go about doing it. So have a bit of fun with that. Then we get information about how to do things like sub-assemblies and such like. Sub-assemblies are what I personally recommend for a lot of minis, because then you can get into all the nooks and crannies behind them. So for instance, I will do sub-assemblies for a lot of the Stormcast Eternals. I won't put them on a base straight away. I will paint them up separate from the base and then put them on a base once they're all painted. With things like some of your units, it's always worth doing it so you can get into a bit of detail. For instance, I'm doing the Kharadron Overlords without putting the arms on first, so they aren't holding their weapons, so you can get in, get all the detail on the armour, and away you go. So there is always that as well. So it's a good technique to have to learn about good old sub-assemblies. So it's always very worth doing it. Moving on though, we get our how to build guide. So obviously you can't build the entirety of this mini straight away, so the rest of it will be coming next week. So you do get interchangeable parts, so you have a few bits and pieces you can use. So whether it's different heads, so you can have it with these kind of, you know, mustache, big massive rock hanging from an ear. You can have it with the jawbone of a monster that it's killed and such like. You can have it with good old different weaponry as well, so different clubs and maces and such like, or even just, you know, bits of rubble that it might be wielding. You can even have it holding a cage, or just, you know, swinging the other arm freely, or even with a different club in its hand and such like. Or you can even have it, you know, carrying a cow, because why not? So depends on how you want to go about doing it, how you want to change up the parts and make it look differently and have it yours, really. So it's up to you. You can have a bit of fun with it. So yeah, you do get a few extra bits and pieces. Any of the bits and pieces that you don't use, in all honesty, you can kind of manipulate and utilize them as kind of like ground debris and stuff like that as well for your minis and stuff like that for your bases. So you can pop, for instance, like things like the arrows, you can have them stuck out of the ground, so like they're jutted into the ground in front of the Gargant and such like. You can even have, say, you can have him running along the good old Johan if you wish to. Entirely up to you though. Anyway, moving on, you get more information about painting techniques. So this is all to do with glazing. So depending on how you want to glaze, you can kind of change the tone of how you're building up your mini, whether it's going from lighter to darker or darker to lighter. It's up to you. So it kind of alters the way you paint and alters how you can kind of get a good effect from minis. So for instance, things like the Marshall or Slog Off, you can get some really, really good kind of paint schemes and change it up and make it look very, very differently. Same with things like your good old contrast paints and such like that you can utilize for things like bones, and you can use them for over the top of everything, and even for things like the Troggoth itself, you know, how to make it look a bit darker on top, lighter down below, or lighter gut and such like. Entirely up to you how you want to utilize this information, but glazes are very, very handy to have. Moving on though, we get our battle plan. So Forged in War, Winds of Change. So with this one, we're still going with the 2 heroes, 4 troops options for our armies. So loads of replayability, 2 territories, and then 3 objectives. So it's all about getting those points and you know, beating the hell out of each other, because why not? So yeah, you also have a special rule of the arcane winds, so you know, you can change how things go. But otherwise, it's pretty decent. It's not too bad. It's a pretty decent battle plan from the looks of it. And then, though, moving on, we obviously find out a bit more information about what we're getting from issue 61. So we get the rest of the Eldgars of Gargant. We've got Ardboys. We've got more good old Stormcast Eternals, including the Drakes, the good old Storm Drakes. We get more of the scenery. We get another mat, and yeah, it's all pretty decent. So pretty good stuff coming up, and some good stuff that I must admit I'm looking forward to. So it should be really good fun to have, and to have a play with and toy with and enjoy, and yeah, happy days. So good times. Anyway, moving on. Next week, obviously, the second part of our Eldgars of Gargant. So we'll get that. We'll get information about Realm of Fire, so good old Akshi, and a new campaign. The week after, we get more paint, so we get White Scar and we get Silabite Green. Both are pretty decent colours. In all honesty, Silabite Green I don't use very often. I only use it on certain paint schemes, but it's still a pretty good colour to have in your paint palette, essentially. And yeah, we'll learn more about highlighting and Oryx as well. So, good times. That is it from me today. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already checked them out, I've done a whole get started with good old Age of Sigmar series of videos. I've also started doing it with 40k, and the rest of the videos should be hopefully out next week, providing I've got enough time to record and rewrite parts of them. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you sometime soon. Bye bye now.